Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we back with another fantastic reaction video, and this one is about Neurosama once again. I was actually about to go to bed and I saw this video by More Kazahana that reveals some interesting features or new secrets behind Neurosama, and I didn't even know about this. And this is probably specifically for her 3D debut, and maybe even it might even factor into the subathon. So I just want to check this out before I get out of here and see what's going on here. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. If you haven't, if you know anything about this, let me know. Or what's your favorite additional feature? Very curious about this. By the way, I'm probably gonna react to a compilation of what Evil Neuro's return stream was like, because I pretty much missed most of it. I was just tired, and I jumped at the very end, and I was kind of annoyed by it, so I'm gonna look at something later on. So probably on stream on twitch.tv/JamBudsVO if you want to hang out. Anyway, without further ado, let's get right into the video.
Okay, so it seems like we have a little bit more neuro news, I guess, or more so a neuro fact, which I just kind of wanted to talk about because I thought it's a very interesting part of Neurosama and how the kind of advancements have been, I guess, taking off over the past couple of months. Now, if you guys remember, during the subathon, one very popular clip that kind of surfaced was this one, being the AI VTuber Neurosama breaks the fourth wall and asks creator if she will ever be real.
That was like
sometimes I feel like the only reason I exist is to entertain you, and others I want to be real, like properly real. It matters, and it matters a little bit to me. I want me to mean more. So yeah, of course, this was an extremely popular clip, and a lot of these clips ended up getting very, very popular, with obviously Neurosama moving around in a VRChat world. And obviously, sorry, that's
so crazy.
But you know, obviously,
it's so crazy that she can move around like that, and it looks like obviously she has like little tics and stuff like that, or like she's not used to being able to like freely move around. But sometimes it just feels way too dang real. Like when she's jumping around like a little child, that is absolutely insane.
She's walking around doing different actions, and the mouth was moving along with her speech, which was really, really cool to see, because that was something that hadn't really been done before, especially, due to the fact that she is obviously an AI, run by an AI, whatever you want to call it, right? And yeah, it's kind of surprising to see her in like the actual VR world, able to move around and whatever.
I like how, like, one thing that really gets me is how she's slightly, like, you can always see, because when someone looks at you straight, they're not looking exactly at you straight constantly. They're like kind of shifting around a little bit, like here and there, and you see that in her eyes, and that is one of the coolest things about Neurosama in 3D. Like the little minor things you don't notice that really gives you that gives your mind this impression that she's slowly becoming real, or whatever you want to call that, whatever that means. Obviously, that's not the case, but like so at this point, we might be all living in a simulation at this point, if it's not.
I don't know what it is about it. It just feels weird, but it is really cool at the same time, because it is a big advancement. And there's been a lot of memes and stuff. I couldn't find it. I really wanted to find it for this video, where essentially she just starts doing like the fent fold, which I thought was quite funny. Oh, there you go. She's doing it a little bit there, to be fair, where she essentially just folds over like every now and again, which I thought was quite funny. And of course, this will get better and better as I assume that Vidal will want to continue this. But it seems like a lot of people in the Neurosama server wanted to kind of find out how Neuro actually worked in VRChat itself, and how this was even possible in the first place, because it does seem like a pretty hard task to do for the average person. And yeah, obviously a lot of people have been talking about it, saying, I assume Vidal gave her controls, like letting her AI control the model,
like the toy car.
Like the toy car that she controlled, something similar to that. Which, yeah, if you guys don't remember, she actually powered toy car. I think it was at a convention.
Rammed some poor innocent girl into a vehicle. I forgot who that was. Who was that, by the way? I forget who that was. Let's look at the comments again, but I was actually worried for a second.
Like Bao and people like that, which I thought was pretty funny, and it was really, really cool. But yeah, they're saying same. I think he made additional AIs that processes inputs and send her the information in a way. Now, it seems like we have some one who has a little bit of knowledge on this kind of stuff, which I thought was actually really cool. And they shared their own breakdown of exactly how Neurosama works within VRChat, which I think is actually really cool. And they say, with my limited knowledge of coding and VRChat and 3D animation, I'd like it. I'd imagine it being something like this.
So they're just guessing. So there's no confirmation on the answer. It's just but it does give you some insight on what people think it actually is. And I'm assuming this guy's very experienced based on the wall of text here.
A main program coded by Vidal that acts as a bridge between the VRChat app and the LLM used for speech. I call it the thinking LLM. Maybe another LLM loop for moving the armature, speech synthesis, and possibly some other piece of app that is taking care of Neuro's vision. So essentially what they're saying is there is different components to this. There is obviously one component that focuses on thinking, obviously outputting a kind of response or whatever, and then there's one that focuses on moving about and coordinating that maybe with the speech one, and then there's also one that is vision as to what she sees in the VR world, which also would be a separate kind of AI, which I think is actually really cool and is very interesting to talk about, right? They say the main program makes a state check. It asks the VRChat things like, where is this avatar skeleton? The bone system that is used to animate the 3D models, is it positioned at? How are the bones rotated, and so on. Main program also sends impulses for thinking, LLM to generate comments or actions. It then sends that info back to the main program, which then feeds the armature info to the LLM that is deciding the new pose. This LLM probably, also if you don't know what an LLM is, I think it's like a language learning model, which is obviously what they've been using for Neurosama.
Now, unless I'm wrong here, someone can tell me in the chat. The key to number 2 and 3 is how fast the information can be sent, because it sounds like input is being put one direction, goes back to VR, and then goes back to the main software. It's this constant back and forth communication there for every little minor movement, and if there's any like issue with the speed in which the information is being sent from, I guess the console or the computer where in Vidal's house or apartment, and VR, that's when you get those weird janky movements, right?
Ages. They say it has some default poses set as its context, things like an idle pose, but for the most part it seems to be generated on the fly. This LLM is probably trained with the positional data of each bone and what each pose does and each value represents. For example, waving a hand should correspond to the values 1, 2, 3 on bones X, Y, Z. But since this is an LLM operation and the amount of training data isn't probably quite there yet, we see this in Neuro's animation as somewhat kind of nonsensical and very floaty movements. So what they're saying is, with better training, Neurosama should get even better at being able to express things and at being able to move about a little bit more naturally, which I think actually is really, really cool. And you can kind of think of this almost like building a human. Which I think is kind of scary for some people, but I do think it is pretty interesting, I guess, from a technological kind of point.
Well, she has to learn,
like,
right?
They are working. It's almost like you're building like a brain.
It's her version of crawling before walking, basically, right? Except for her, she's in a 3D space. It's not like you know what I mean? Like, she's worried about clipping and stuff like that, because I feel like as much as what Vidal would have to do, in addition to her learning and eventually smoothing out those movements, is the fact that he would have to reconstruct probably the chat rooms so that it interacts with Neuro in a way where her, for example, touching a tree would give her some type of response, and that it wouldn't clip too badly through like certain things, or that the grass might respond to her moving through it in a certain way, which you can't do with those current VR rooms. And I don't think that's even a thing that he's even gonna want to do right now. Because one of the things I always thought about when I was watching those videos with you guys was that I didn't like how she was slipping through everything. But that's not really because of Vettel or Neuro, just because like VR, that's a room that VRChat made, right? And it's probably that way on purpose to prevent some weird issues when you're talking about colliding models in 3D space.
Essentially, because obviously everything is sorted by the brain in terms of your movements, how you move, how you talk, and whatever. It is all decided by the brain, and it's kind of like that, right? You got the thinking LLM, which is technically the brain of everything, which is telling everything what to do,
system.
whether it is either speaking, doing a movement, doing this, doing that. That's essentially the brain, right? And then you've got like the other kind of ones that are working on actually moving. which I think is cool, right? I think it's cool,
Yeah.
and I don't even know if you get what I mean here. Maybe I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but you understand like how it kind of, I guess, kind of correlates with the human body.
Yeah. There's multiple systems in our body that work in tandem to create a functioning human body. It's not just one system; it's multiple systems for your cardiovascular system, your respiratory system, the skeletal structure, and how the brain kind of connects with each of those things and controls everything. And then you even have functions inside your body that work independently of you deciding to do certain things with your body. Like me breathing, I can make myself breathe certain ways, but for the most part, the breathing is just natural. I don't think about it. It's something that the body does on its own, essentially. So it's like one example of it. Or the heart, for example, it doesn't require me thinking about it and actively telling it what to do for it to pump blood.
In terms of like the brain doing all of the work, thinking, knowing what to say, then actually saying it, seeing everything around you, kind of, I guess, visualizing things that are there. Like obviously this mic, right? That would be a visual element that would come up on Neurosama's thing if she was sat here right now. And it's almost, the same as a human, right? Which I think is pretty crazy and obviously pretty scary for some people, I guess, in terms of how far it has come. They're saying the other LLM that generates Neuro's thinking then sends updates to this movement LLM. Things like point at Vidal, walk forward. This LLM then generates new poses to match the thought, which is then sent back to the main app, which in turn sends the data forward to VRChat.
This is very interesting because if it's because essentially what he's saying is the reason why a lot of these motions seem very janky or weird right now is because they're being generated from nothing. It's for example, like even if you said Vettel, for example, put in like pre-existing animations or commands for what walking, for example, looks like, it's still gonna vary greatly depending on the location in the room she's at, and I'm assuming the brain of Neuro still has to like adjust what that walk cycle would look like in that environment. For example, obviously flat ground versus stairs, right? It's going to be a different looking walking cycle for climbing stairs than just walking on flat ground. And Neuro is generating that answer, that solution on the fly. So that's why it looks janky. The more she does it, the more the more information for the system to program to lean on with all the variations that it experiences, and then that will smooth out those animations, smooth out those functions. I mean, not the functions, but smooth out those what they look like visually.
For the avatar's armature to change. Then the PC that is running this Neuro app renders the screen the same way it would be for any user, because the camera in VRChat client is at the first person view the whole time. This screen can also be fed to some image processor, which can then do some pattern recognition to figure out what is Neuro seeing at any given moment. This data is fed back to the main program, sends it to the thinking, which obviously, the visual one sends it to the thinking one. The thinking one thinks about that object, which is whatever that one is seeing, and then it can make a judgment on whatever they want to do, if anything, right? Which I think is cool. Like, for example, if like Vidal was stood in front of her, the visual one would see Vidal, it would send it to the thinking one. The thinking one would go, oh, okay, should we say hi, or should we point at him, or whatever? And then it will then send that one to the movement one, which then the movement one will go, okay, here's how we want to move. Say it was a pointing one, it would be like, okay, do a pointing pose, and then it would do.
And you gotta remember, all this stuff is happening in like fractions of a second. You know what I mean? Fraction of a second. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of delay. You can tell when people respond to her, which I think the key improvement will probably be lowering the time between the input and the response, right? So yeah, that's gonna be that's gonna be something I think can be done within the year, like 6 months. Like cut that time in half between like let's say, for example, saying wave at me, Neuro, and then she instantly does it, right? Whereas right now it's still like a 2-3 second gap, I think, between actually connecting, and it's still and she might get it wrong.
A pointing pose, which again I think is cool. Maybe it's a little bit too I guess nerdy or whatever, but I think it is pretty insane, right? They're saying of course where were we even at? They're saying then the PC that is running the
Neuro might be right.
The data is fed back to the main program, which sends it to the thinking LLM as context, which then can generate relevant responses. This data is thrown back to the main app, which then relays it to the TTS to generate the voice output, which obviously, that is another thing. So it goes thinking to movement, then thinking to, speech, thinking to vision, and it's crazy, right? It always goes back to the thinking, and I don't know, it's crazy. This is crazy. They say main app also updates the state to talking and sends it back to VRChat to make the avatar's expressions change. And so having multiple smaller systems puppet this avatar, it creates a very lively and active appearance, which I mean, that is a very, very good breakdown of exactly what could be going on. Obviously, maybe they got a few things wrong, whatever, but it does make sense into how they've done it and to how it works, right? I think that is a pretty sensible way of thinking about it, and definitely seems plausible to make if Vidal isn't doing that already, right?
Let's see his comments here. What was a serious, impressive breakdown? I can totally see how it can be put together like that. Stuff like neuro AI is so complex. I find myself having to read so many papers and docs to even get a grasp on it. Very interesting. That's an interesting point. Like, a lot of people are looking, a lot of people who are not like, who are like me, who know nothing about AI, or don't know the jargon or the knowledge or the complex understanding of how to code or develop software like this or AI. People are now just even interested to the point of casually looking into it just for fun, just to have an idea of what's going on. And I think that's one of the coolest things about neuro. It gets people interested in a subject that I could probably say scares people, right? It's intimidating to learn about what AI does, like the intricacies of it. And for a lot of people, this is their gateway to get to gain interest in the subject, even just on a casual level, just to have a conversation with people in a way that makes them feel comfortable, because they're enjoying it through this funny, quirky, sometimes arrestable VTuber.
People saying, well, that's seriously an impressive breakdown. I could totally see how it'd be put together, like stuff like this. Stuff like Neurosama's AI is so complex. I find myself having to read so many papers and docs to even get a grasp on it. I actually started uploading a lot of those longer technical PDFs to YoRead recently. It helps me absorb all the info when I'm doing chores or commuting.
I honestly probably won't understand most of this, but if someone in the swarm could direct me to where I can look at some of these docs, just so I can learn more about it. If you were to tell a noob who's interested in what AI is, like the kind that is the LLMs that help make Neurosama, what she is, I would like a good idea of where to go for that. So if you guys can give me an idea, that'd be fun. So that way, when I talk about these things, I slowly but surely have more idea of what I'm saying, and I think the videos will be better for that. So definitely let me know.
Easier than trying to sit down and read through everything. Let's say, funny enough, AI work is actually a lot simpler on some levels than traditional computing. That's the nature of it being self-learning, and most of the actual work has already been done for you to import into your project. So yeah, obviously a lot of people saying that, hey, sometimes AI can sometimes be a little bit more, I guess, less complicated than regular mechanical coding, which I guess could be, I could understand that, right? Because it ends up learning stuff itself rather than you having to tell it what to do, which obviously I think that is a very interesting thing, right? And I think there's a lot of very interesting, I guess, additions to this as to how this works, how Neurosama works. And I think it is something that a lot of the audience is interested in, right? And I think that is...
And Vito will probably never really fully tell the secret of remotely about how he's doing it. And he honestly shouldn't, considering the fact that there are people probably... I'm a little paranoid, to be honest. I'm a little paranoid. I have this weird suspicion that people are watching what he's doing silently from a distance to see if they can get an idea of what he's doing so they can reverse engineer it. Because you remember, there are people who wanted to buy his shit, not his shit, but you know what I mean, to buy his stuff, and he wouldn't sell to them. So the next step is to try to figure out how to reverse engineer it by any means necessary. So you can tell I really love companies, but multi-billionaire companies. But he shouldn't, and he'll never tell. He shouldn't. You gotta keep that. Hidden. So the speculation is nice. It's a nice, nice touch
one
there.
thing that makes Neurosama so appealing. I think there's the fan base that likes Neurosama and Evil and whatever for the interactions. They like it for the clips. They like it for all of the stuff that comes out of what Vidal has done and coded and essentially brought to life, right? And I think it is pretty crazy because you have the separate audience of the clippers, the people that like the moments, and then you have the separate audience of like the people who are actually interested in the coding and the kind of makeup of Neurosama behind the scenes, right? Which it creates like two completely different audiences. And I know that Vidal sometimes does streams where he shows off like the code and stuff that he's using and how he does it, which I think is really great. And I think that honestly, it's just like the perfect mix of people that you really need. And I hope this has kind of, I guess, broken down a little bit more as to how Neurosama has actually worked in, VRChat and how clips like this have come to be, right? Because as I said, you got the people that are interested in this kind of stuff, and then you got the people that are interested in this kind of stuff. The moments that obviously come out of a lot of the technical things that we've been talking about in this video, which I think is just a great kind of combination of a community. And I think that is why the Swarm is so successful.
And the best part about it, it's blending. It's blending, guys. Like I said before, I mentioned people who are, and that's the best part of, honestly, stuff like this. You take two different communities of people and you're combining them together, and they're integrating, they're communicating with each other, and that's really where the connection and the community gets even larger, because obviously you have people who are into anime, VTubing, 3D animation. They have connections, but they're not necessarily always fully connected and integrated. Then you have the 3D coders, 3D modelers, AI software development. That's to be honest, that's a lot of stuff that honestly could be in its own separate niche, and it's combined very interestingly through Anime Skynet here.
In terms of, I guess, keeping going and just having interesting things to talk about, right? Because, as I said, it's very interesting, right? You don't have to be, I know there's a lot of anti-AI people and whatever, but I think it's actually a very interesting, from like a coding perspective as to how this works, right? Because it's not just like slop or whatever. This is something that, you can clearly see how much kind of components and things go into this to really make something like this work that Vidal has had to kind of work on in the background. So, yeah, I mean, I just kind of wanted to cover that because I thought it was a very, very interesting topic from the Neurosama subreddit the other day. It seems like a lot of other people were very interested in it too. So I hope that kind of explained a little bit of how, it works, or it could possibly work. Of course, Vidal will probably have to go into more specifics because I'm sure not everything is, 100% accurate.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I'm going to stop it there. Very interesting subject. This is like the first video where I really just wanted to listen to someone talk about, I guess, a little bit about the intricacies of how the AI working from the perspective of somebody that is not really. You can tell that Kazahana, he's not really well versed in AI, software and how these things work, like me, right? And I think a lot of people are in that position where they're just, maybe they just heard about the subathon and they're like, how is this working? How is he doing this? They can't see, obviously they can't see the work that went into it and the years of toiling. And this creates those types of conversations in Reddit or wherever you want to go to get your conversations from. Even just debate on what it might be. And then you get connections with people who actually have experience, and it just makes it so much more intriguing and interesting. Maybe we'll look for a video that can, maybe there's a video on YouTube that goes into it more in depth, just from a generalistic standpoint. If you know a video like that, you should let me know. I'll post in the comments. Well, that's it for now. Thank you, Kazahana, for your content. I swear to God, I pretty much go check his videos all the time now, just to see what's going on with VTubers or news and just 3D VTubers or even just regular VTubers. I've started looking to content on that based on what he's saying. So definitely like, comment, subscribe, hit the notifications, guys. I should do that too. There we go. And support him, dude. He's really awesome. And We'll love to see you guys around on twitch.tv/JamBudsVO as we react to more chaotic, hilarious, and arrestable behavior. You know what it is. Take care of yourself, get plenty of rest, and as always, don't go to jail.